Forms and social media integration. A form allows a user to enter information that can be processed for some purpose. This is an example of a form, and we will build a form in the French Alps website. The form element acts as a container for controls. So all of these are controls, and they reside inside of the form element. The input control is one type of control, the text area, and the select control. Let's see which of these are input controls. So the ones we see in fuchsia are input controls. This is the text area control and the select control. In order to have a text field that allows a user to enter their password, we have to use the type attribute and the value password. So this is different from what we used to do before. For example, when we use the ID attribute or the class attribute, we choose our own value that goes between quotations. With forms, we have to use specific words so that the browser provides us with what we're looking for. So if we want a text field for a user to enter their password, we have to use the type attribute and the word password absolutely. If we want a user to upload their file, and we want the browser to give us a button that allows the user to click on, that takes them to their hard drive, we have to use the type attribute with the word file between quotations. If we want a user to enter their name or any kind of information that's, their name, their last name, their favorite color, anything, we should say type text to end up with this text field that allows them to enter text. Type checkbox will allow a user to choose 1, 2, 3, all, none. Type radio will allow the user to choose 1, only 1. So if they choose I'm romantic and then they choose I'm realistic, then I am romantic will be unchecked. So radio allows a user to only select 1, whereas checkbox allows a user to select all or 1 or 2 or 3 or none. If we want a submit button, we have to use the type attribute with the word submit between quotation marks. HTML5 introduced more than a dozen new input types, such as type range. Type range is used to build sliders, like this one for example. And the range input type is used to specify a numeric value picked from within a given range. For example, specify your age. What is your age? It works on all browsers. And this is an example of syntax where type range is used. So input is the element, type is the attribute, and the value range absolutely should be there in order for the browser to give us a slider. Minimum is the minimum value allowed, maximum is the maximum value allowed, and step is the increment. So if you want the user to only be allowed an increment of 5, that's the value you would insert here. So then they would end up with the possibility of choosing 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. If you want an increment of 1, you would put 1 here. Value 50 is where you would want the slider to be when the page loads. So 50 is the middle. If you want it at 25, you would just say 25 here so that the slider is at 1/3 the width. Name rating. The name attribute is extremely important, and we'll explain it later in the lesson. We'll keep seeing the name attribute, but we'll explain it further on when we actually apply the form, and that's when it will make sense. The break obviously is a break so that we can write on a new line, and what we did here is insert a submit button by using the input element type submit. Another example of a new input type by HTML5 is type email. For input fields that should contain an email address, so the browser gives us an email text field. The email address entered will be automatically validated when submitted. It works on all browsers except for Safari. And this is an example of syntax. We're using the input element, the type attribute, with the value email by all means in order for the browser to give us the email text field, the name attribute, which we will explain later, and then the input type submit to get the submit button. The input control syntax example. So first of all, text. Label element for attribute, enter your name. On a new line, input element type text, name attribute, ID attribute, and we get this. Now, if we look at the syntax, it might look a bit strange to us, but basically this syntax is creating this visual on the browser. Obviously, this visual is styled with gray and with a bold Verdana font, but this is what we will get. We will get a text field if we type these two lines, okay? So what the first line is doing, we're using the label element in order to just write a phrase, and our phrase happens to be enter your name. The input element is being used with the type attribute, and when we say type text, it means we are getting a simple text field in which a user can enter their name or their last name or whatever we want them to enter. The name attribute we will explain later. Now, the for and the ID, if you notice, they have the same color, right? And they also have the same value. The reason for this is because we want to make a link between the phrase and the text field. So if you're a user and you want to enter your name here, you want to click on this box. But if you also click on the phrase enter your name somewhere on the phrase, the box will be highlighted. And that's because you have created, or the designer, the web designer, has created a link between the phrase and the text field by using the same value for ID and for. And the value happens to be just a random word such as your name. Okay? Checkbox. So span, what are your favorite colors? So this looks like a phrase. And then input type checkbox. So when we say input type checkbox, then we will get checkboxes. Label blue, label fuchsia, label purple. It's the same thing repeated, but for 3 different checkboxes. Let's see how this looks. So this is what we get if we write the syntax. So we use the span element in order to get this phrase, and then we used the type checkbox control in order to get the checkboxes. So the browser gave us these boxes. If we want the word blue or the word fuchsia or the word purple before the checkbox, all we need to do is just switch the order here and put label before input type checkbox. ID and for have the same value. In the first one it's color 1, and the second is color 2, and the third is color 3. And that's because if we click on the word blue, we want a check to appear in the checkbox, or if we click on the checkbox, we want it to be checked. So we're creating a link between the value and the checkbox itself. The text area control syntax example. Again, we expect to see a phrase that says describe yourself, and we expect to see a text area. Now the text area is an element, okay? So it's not like the previous examples where we need to use the input element with the type attribute. In the case of the text area is the element. We are creating the link between the phrase and the text area by giving the same value description for the for attribute and the ID attribute, and we are specifying how big we want the text area to be by specifying a number of rows and a number of columns, which are invisible, by the way. So we get this nice text area. HTML5 has also introduced media elements such as audio and video, and they appear as such. For example, perhaps this is Chrome and they appear slightly differently on Firefox and so on. The audio formats, currently there are 3 supported file formats for the audio element: the MP3, the WAV, and the OGG. And this is a small table that shows us on which browsers each format works. So MP3 works on all browsers, but the WAV and the OGG have issues with some of the browsers. This is the syntax we use to insert audio. So audio controls. The controls are basically the play, stop, rewind buttons, and so on. And we can go ahead and provide 2 formats such as the OGG and the MPEG or the MP3. The video formats, again, there are currently 3 supported video formats: the MP4, the WebM, and the OGG. The MP4 again works on all browsers. And we just go ahead and use this syntax, and we specify the width and the height of the video. We can obviously change those values depending on the size, and the controls are for the play, stop, pause buttons, and so on. Social media. The purpose of social media is to market or promote something, such as a company, an event, a celebrity, a band, and so on. It is effective because it engages users and invites them to participate. There are different types of social media. You know, Facebook, Twitter, Delicious, YouTube, Vimeo, Tumblr, StumbleUpon, and so on.